Kia ora everyone, my name is Ashley, and as Jean said, I've been at Canterbury Museum for 8, coming up 9 years in July. I've graduated through museums roles where I started off with the Peter Johns collections in the entomology department, where I was cataloguing all of the insects found all around New Zealand. And then I went into the inventory project, where I've since become the lead technician. So I get to work hands-on with a lot of our objects, cataloguing them, photographing them, making sure their descriptions and classifications are all accurate. As she said, my specialist field is natural history. I studied that at university in zoology and ecology, and have loved the outdoors and wildlife ever since. Back in October, I was very grateful to receive the Heritage Expedition Young Explorers Scholarship, which we departed for in November, and into December we were down in the Subantarctics. This was just one of my get-ups on the expedition days on the land. You have to rug up with lots and lots of layers because it's very cold. So the expedition departed from Hobart, and then we went down to Macquarie Island, up to Campbell Island, to the Auckland Islands, and then to the Snares, and then to docking back at home in Bluff. This is just an overview of that route. We were aboard the Heritage Adventurer, which is 124 metres long, 17 metres wide. It has 8 decks, 140 guests in 74 cabins. I was buddied up with another young explorer. The maximum speed is 15 knots. We have 14 Zodiacs on board, which are little rubber inflatable boats that help ferry us from the ship to land. There's also a library, a gym, a spa, a sauna, lounge, bar and bistro, restaurant, and a gift shop. The ship itself was also built in Finland. It was registered in Spain. It's run by a New Zealand company. There is US dollars on board. It's staffed by Filipinos and has a European power outlets. So it's an amalgamation of cultures, which made it all very confusing. This here is the group of young explorers who received the scholarship. There were 9 of us in total on this expedition. There's only 8 in the photograph. One of the other guys was off doing something. The scholarship is for people between the ages of 18 and 30 with a particular interest in the subantarctic region. I sent off an email application with a bit about myself and why I thought I should receive the scholarship, but others made up slideshows and recorded videos of themselves for the applications. Which I didn't realise you could do. As the previous image suggested, the first stop of the expedition was at Macquarie Island, which sits about halfway between New Zealand and Antarctica. Although it is governed by Tasmania, Australia, if you look on a map, it's technically an extension of the Southern Alps of New Zealand, sitting on the edge of the Australian and the Pacific plates. It is also the only place in the world that you can see exposed oceanic plates above the water. In 1997, Macquarie Island was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, meaning that they have cultural, natural, or scientific importance to the world. This here is the view from our ship to the Australian Research Station along the isthmus of Macquarie Island. I'll draw attention to the isthmus here. If you look in the enlarged section, it's that narrow strip of land between a hill and the rest of the island. We spent most of our time in Buckles Bay here, and then further down at the next indent at Sandy Bay, and then we did a ship's cruise right around to Caroline Cove down the bottom. This is the Buckles Bay Isthmus landing point, showing the Zodiacs ferrying the passengers to and from the ship to the land, and then there are some southern elephant seals lounging on the beach in the foreground. This here is a southern elephant seal. They are the largest species of seal in the world, and while this might look like he's fully grown, he's not. He's actually a subadult male. He's estimated to weigh about 2.5 tonnes, but male elephant seals can weigh up to 4 tonnes and reach 6 metres in length. They are up to 10 times larger than the females, who only weigh about 900 kgs and reach 3 metres in length. Males can also develop an enlarged proboscis, which I think is what we're most familiar seeing them as. This helps them establish dominance on the beach when they roar and guard their harem of females. All of the female and mature male elephant seals had departed the land before we got there. They had already weaned their pups and done all their businesses they needed to do. They are often found in these cuddle piles, which was about 5 metres away from our landing site. They're really unfazed by us. This here is a weaner, so when they're born they weigh approximately 40 kgs, and the mother will nurse the pup for 28 days, and then they can weigh up to 120 kgs. They then spend a further 10-ish weeks on land learning to swim and dive before venturing out into the ocean. Here's just another cuddle pile of the elephant seals. Many of the southern elephant seals we encountered were in various stages of molting. You can see here with the patchy skin and fur. The only time they really haul out on land is during this period, and it can take up to a month to shed all of the hair and skin. And during this period, they don't feed, so they can lose their condition a bit. Just another view. Quite smelly, really. And another wee weaner. These two big pots are called digesters, and they were on the isthmus at Macquarie Island near where the Australian Research Station is based. Digesters were brought to Macquarie Island by a man named Joseph Hatch in the late 18th century, and they were used by sealers who would pile in dead elephant seals and often live penguins into these large steamers and pressure cook them to render them down for oils, and about 500 litres of these oils was worth about $2,000. Seals and penguins here were almost hunted to extinction during this period. Subsequently, this was banned in the 1920s, and since then the populations have significantly recovered, but are unfortunately again in decline. Here we also encountered our second species, the gentoo penguin colony, amongst the grasses along the isthmus. Gentoo penguins are about 75 to 90 centimetres tall, weighing between 4.5 and 8.5 kg. The deepest recorded dive was 210 metres, but on average between about 4 and 80 metres. They're the fastest diving penguins as well, and can swim at about 36 kilometres an hour, which is pretty fast. This is a gentoo adult and a chick on a nest. They are scattered throughout those grasses, as you saw in a previous slide, and they're right next to where the elephant seals haul out, and it did make me wonder how many get squished each year, because the elephant seals have no regard for anybody else around them. Another species of subantarctic bird is the subantarctic skua. These predate on chicks and eggs from the penguins, but are beautiful themselves. Here we just have a panoramic view from a platform up a series of 99 steps above Buckles Bay. You can see the isthmus and the Australian Research Station along here with the big ball, and our ship out in the distance as well. Another view of that. This was our first sighting of the king penguins, up close at least. They are the second largest of the penguin species, standing about 80 to 90 centimetres tall. The colour which we can see on their bills is indicative of their age. The darker the penguin, the darker the colour, the older the penguin. So you can see there's probably a bit of a age difference in these two here. Macquarie Island also has about 70,000 pairs of them, but it is not the only breeding colony. King penguins can dive to depths of 100 to 300 metres and spend approximately 5 minutes in a single dive, sometimes as long as 10 minutes though. It's a long time to hold your breath. Following our morning landing on the isthmus of Macquarie Island, we then had a Zodiac tour of Sandy Bay in the afternoon. We only got out on the Zodiacs because the waves were too dumpy on shore for a landing at this place. However, we did manage that the next day. Macquarie Island rockhopper penguins colony. They are named rockhoppers as they legitimately hop over rocks, tussocks, seals, etc., instead of waddling or sliding. They can weigh about 45 to 55 centimetres tall and can weigh about 2 to 3.8 kgs, and their diving depth is around 25 metres. Here we can see two actually hopping over the rocks. We didn't get very close to them on the Zodiacs, but our zoom cameras enabled us to see their wicked yellow eyebrows that they have. They stand up and make me envious. This here, which is quite difficult to make out, but is a portion of the Sandy Bay colony of penguins. We've got the king penguins down on the beach, and then the royal penguin colony up in the hills there. You can see all these black and white dots. They're all penguins, heaps of them. There is a boardwalk up to the viewing platform to see this royal penguin colony. However, we weren't able to get up there as there was a subantarctic skua nesting right beside the boardwalk, and we don't like to disturb the animals where we can. And yeah, we don't want her to abandon her chick or the nest and have a failed breeding season. Anyway, you can see here I've got 3 species. We've got a king penguins in the foreground, we've got a skua sitting on the beach, and we've got a southern elephant seal weaner still, and you can just see the size of those skuas there really well. They are big birds. This is a whole lot of king penguins with their fluffy brown chicks dotted throughout them that we saw from the Zodiacs. Later on the next day, we did manage to get onto the beach and walk around with them. So this is the following day at our landing space on Sandy Bay in Macquarie Island. We're only allowed 60 people on shore at one time, but we were very fortunate to have Ash Rushton from Tasmania Parks and Wildlife and Noel Carmichael, who is the manager of the invasive species branch at Biosecurity Tasmania, aboard our boat, which allowed us to kneel on the island, which you're not normally allowed to do. They like to minimise contact with the environment for things like bird flu and all of that. You can see here that we really just had to squeeze ourselves into the landing site. The animals don't make room for you. And yeah, we made sure that we don't want to invade their space and keep their distance where possible. But on the whole, they weren't afraid of us, just curious. This is just a video when I was walking along the beach up to where we were gathering. But yeah, these king penguins really are just curious. It's a weaner southern elephant seal up close. Quite cute in a weird way. Before the noses develop, I think they're cute. Here we've got the colony of king penguins, and the feathers are all scruffy and falling out, making way for the new clean and waterproofed feathers. Gives them some funky hairstyles and strange tufts left on their chests or heads, still yet to fall out. You can see that guy in the lower right-hand side with his chest hair. The colours of them were just beautiful. Having a bit of a conflab. This is a king penguin chick, and these guys can weigh so much more than the adults and are almost twice as round. In the early days of discovery, scientists often thought that the chicks and the adults were two different species due to the difference in appearance. This is another hillside shot. The hill was absolutely covered in very muddy feathers. Again, just a better example of the two juvenile and adult species of king penguin. So here we've got some royal penguins. They're slightly shorter than the king penguins, and it sort of looked like they were being escorted along the beach by the teacher king penguin, but they're quite funny. Here we've got a wiener elephant seal doing what is called a banana pose. This shows that they're like super relaxed and everything. And he actually had just flipped off the royal penguin when it was hopping along its tail, and yeah, sent it flying and then just lounging around. Royal penguins are between 65 to 75 centimetres tall and weigh about 4 to 8 kgs. They only breed on Macquarie Island with an estimated population size of 1,600,000 birds. A bit of a fun fact about them is that they lay 2 eggs with extreme size dimorphism, the first being much smaller than the second, which is laid 4 days later. Only about 1% of the first laid eggs survive and are usually discarded from the nest early on. And the reason behind this behaviour is not understood. I think it might be a sacrifice to the skewers. There's just another elephant seal pile. This here is Lusitania Bay, which was further down the coast of Macquarie Island. We weren't allowed to land here in the penguin colony because it is so dense and we'd be getting way too close. There are a couple of digesters, which were those big orange vats that I spoke about earlier, which the Tasmanian government have decided to leave there because A, getting it out would cause too much disruption on the colony. B, it's a reminder of a piece of history / it's a historical artefact. And C, it's kind of cool that the penguins have claimed back the land from which they were almost wiped out from. So they have been left in place. Here we've got a raft of king penguins, which is what it's called when they're all on the water together. It was truly fantastic to see them porpoising along, which is like when they swim and launch themselves out of the water in a series of dives. You can see a couple there mid-porpoise. The royal penguin colony that you see here is near the southern tip of Macquarie Island, where the largest royal penguin colony in the world is located. I don't have an actual photo of the largest royal penguin colony to show you because it was such a terrible photo that it's not worth being included. It was a terrible day, the cloud was low and visibility was not so great. Here we had a visit from some orcas as we were travelling from Macquarie Island to Campbell Island. I wasn't fast enough to catch them, but I did get sent this video here from one of the other researchers on Macquarie Island. You can see that they've been hunting and they got a wiener elephant seal. The kill was that spray of blood that we saw. And there were about 6 to 9 orca we estimated. I also got sent this photo here, which is an orca feasting on a royal penguin. Again, it's not a photograph of my own, but the crew aboard the boat saw this and snapped a photo of it for me to share. So our next stop was Campbell Island, which was after 2 days at sea. The red line indicates where our boat travelled, and the thinner red line on the land indicates where we did a walk, which was along the Coal Saddle and up and over to the cliff edge to the north of Northwest Bay through a Campbell Island albatross colony. The walk along the boardwalk, which was approximately 40 centimetres wide, and it made passing another person on the boardwalk quite of a circus act, all leaning out, holding onto each other. The purpose of the boardwalk is to minimise the impact on the vegetation of people who do visit. We don't want to crush the plants and walk off in a direction that is potentially going to disturb albatrosses that nest there. However, there was a loop of the boardwalk along the cliff edge, which many people blew off, onto the land side at least. And they landed on the vegetation and peat, so sometimes it is unavoidable. Mount Honey was a mountain on this island where it had the fastest recorded wind speed on Earth. I think it was something, oh, sorry, let me just get the number. I think it was 240 kilometres. Can't find my mouse. Anyway. This here is a view of the Northeast Harbour from the boardwalk track of Campbell Island. It was quite a foreign landscape. There are no trees here. The shrubs are very stunted in growth due to the winds that they get here. And we've got a southern royal albatross breeding pair in the tussocks. That was quite close by. And then this one here was nesting about 1 metre away from the boardwalk that we were walking along. When we got to the section near it, we had to keep walking quite fast past it. There was no pausing to interrupt what it was doing or anything like that. Instead, zoom lenses were great. You can see some of the megaherbs of the Campbell Island. And a Hooker's sea lion, which was our second species of seal seen. This was taken near the loneliest tree in the world, which is a Sitka spruce tree and believed to have been planted on Campbell Island by Lord Ramfurly between 1901 and 1907. The nearest tree to that tree is located over 222 kilometres away on Auckland Island, and it looks rather stunted in growth because each year the staff at the weather station in Beeman Cove of Campbell Island would chop off the top to use as their Christmas tree. Our third stop of the expedition was at the Auckland Islands. Again, that red line indicates where we went on the boat. We came in from the bottom near Adams Island, came in Canterbury Harbour up into the North Arm, back out again and along the coast. These were some of my favourite days on this expedition. Despite the abundance of wildlife and up-close encounters of Macquarie Island and being a thorough animal lover, I adored being more immersed in the environment that we got to experience on Auckland Island, which included a hike around Enderby Island and Zodiac cruises in the Canterbury Harbour and Musgrave Inlets. Musgrave Inlet is the little indent that you can see of the red line halfway up, and then Enderby Island is the one right at the top. It was also really interesting to hear about all of the shipwrecks which occurred around the Auckland Islands, which I did develop a little bit of an obsession with before heading down. Our first day at the Auckland Islands included a ship cruise in the Zodiacs up Canterbury Harbour and Northern Arm, which I spoke about. This here is not my photo, but shows the ribs of the hull from the Grafton shipwreck, which happened in 1864 up the North Arm of Canterbury Harbour. We did a ship's cruise past this point where apparently the ribs of the hull were visible. However, I think I was looking at the wrong thing. So my photograph, don't think depicts this. I would have really enjoyed going onto that beach though, but we didn't have the permits for it, unfortunately. Because it would have been great to go ashore and really feel how it was to be stranded in the conditions that they had. These are a few objects in our museum's collections which I've pulled up for you. which are related to that Grafton shipwreck. You can see the first image is a glass plate negative of the Grafton wreck, and then we've got a stove from the Grafton shipwreck as well in our collection. This here is a hull support from the wreck of the Grafton as well, so it would have made up what those ribs were left, but we've ended up with part of it in our collection. I'm really looking forward to cataloguing these. We haven't got to them yet, but I've got my hand up for that job. Whilst the ship was anchored in Canterbury Harbour, we managed to get out on the Zodiacs for a bit and cruise around the North Arm and Masked Island. Here we saw some gorgeous wildlife, including these Auckland Island adult and juvenile shags. And this here is a Second World War lookout hut, which I have catalogued a glass plate negative of from the Lotteries project, of a view of the shed looking from the land out towards where I am positioned on the boat. So it was quite a nice full circle moment for me. These huts were used to monitor the coastlines for enemy ships during the Second World War. Unfortunately, I was unable to find in our collection the glass plate negative to show you that image. We've got two tui here, perched in a nearby tree, singing their hearts out. The tui songs at Auckland Island was phenomenal. They were so loud, and there were many, many, many birds floating around. Next up, we had a Zodiac cruise in Musgrave Inlet, where we saw several Auckland Island rockhopper penguins sunning themselves on the rocks. So a slightly different species to the Macquarie Island rockhopper and all of that, just because they breed on their own individual islands and don't go between them. Some passengers were able to get out on kayaks for an explore around the Musgrave Inlets, caves and cenotes, while the rest of us were just on the Zodiacs. This is just another shipwreck. Another image of the map, which shows where we were in Musgrave Harbour in the inlet there, and then up into Enderby Island. Another shipwreck which was well documented at Canterbury Museum was the shipwreck of the Dundonald, which occurred on Disappointment Island off the west coast of the Auckland Islands, which is just this wee one out to our left here. This is an image of the survivors from the Dundonald. 16 of the 28 aboard the Dundonald survived the wreck, with another one more passing 12 days later. And you might all be quite familiar with this here. It is the frame of the coracle, which was made by the survivors of the Dundonald. We've had it on display in the Antarctic Gallery for many years now. And so the Dundonald was shipwrecked on Disappointment Island in March 1907, and this coracle was used by the survivors to get from Disappointment Island to the main Auckland Island, where they managed to find a castaway depot with provisions for survival. They were eventually rescued by a passing government ship patrol, the Hinimoa, and while aboard the Heritage Expeditions ship, I did do a presentation on this here, which was quite cool to educate other members about. And on our last day of the Auckland Islands, we were given several activity options for the day. I chose to do the circuit track walk around Enderby Island, and I really recommend doing this if you can get down there. This was a fantastic day of exploring, dodging sea lions and hoi-ho, and avoiding falling into the deep mud and peat, some more successful than others at this. The Enderby Island circuit hike was 10 kilometres and took us about 5.5 hours with a 20-minute stop for lunch. Initially, I didn't believe that a 10k walk would take us this full 7 hours. We were allocated perhaps 3 hours at most. However, as the day went on, we went from a nice boardwalk section to a very thin path through ground vegetation to climbing over tussocks, megaherbs and uneven ground, mud pits and large rocks along the beaches, and you never had level footing, so you needed really good shoes. There were no designated paths or tracks in this section of the walk, just a series of orange marker posts to try and find. It was truly a scramble, and our 5.5 hours was deemed great timing. As you can see, the mega herbs and bushes were waist high, so you really had to concentrate on your footing and keeping the knees high. It's quite difficult filming this at the same time as walking as well. Along the route, we saw lots of wildlife, including this great petrel trick hiding in the bushes. We really had to be quite careful with where we walk so as not to disturb anyone, because they are hidden. You had to keep your wits about you. We were also so fortunate to see so many hoiho, which are the yellow-eyed penguins, including this pair on the cliff edge there. Hoiho are the rarest penguin in the world, and we were lucky to see about 40 of them on this expedition. It's just some tracks through the mud. This here is East Bay, where we paused for our lunch. Seeing these hoiho in the wild was truly amazing. The cliff faces that they scale to get to their nests and resting sites appeared impossible for a penguin to climb, because they've got no hands to help grip onto the rocks and vegetation to help them up. But alas, they do. This is the rata forest. The bellbird and koramako and tui song was super loud. And this here, you can see perched down on the edge of the water there, is an Auckland Island teal on Enderby Island near Teal Lake. I was told by our guides that seeing a teal near Teal Lake was very rare. They don't often see teal there. Teal is a type of duck, I guess, yeah. These are some of the mega herbs on Enderby Island, including Anisotome latifolia, which is the purple one on the left there. They're from the carrot family, and the Stilbocarbo polaris on the right. In the green, the survivors from the Dundonald shipwreck ate the roots of this plant on the right by baking the roots and peeling them and then eating them like potatoes. Some mini succulents in the one section of flat ground. While walking, we also had a really rare sighting of a snipe, adult and chick scuttling through the underbush. Now they're quite hard to see here, but the adult is just in the middle there with its chick just below it. In this image here, there are 5 hoiho. Can you spot them? If I had a pointer, it would be slightly easier, but I'll try and show you. We've got one here. Got another there. Along the walk, we also passed the burial site of the 15 people who perished on the Derry Castle, which shipwrecked on the Auckland Islands. Canterbury Museum has quite a few objects from this in their collection as well. This is an image from our collection of the huts made by the survivors, of the Derry Castle. They're the grass flax huts that they built up next to a castaway depot. This here is a figurehead from the bow of the Derry Castle that we've got in our collection. I actually wrapped this object myself when we moved from our site on Wollaston Avenue to where we are now. This is that same castaway depot that I showed in a previous one, that wooden structure here on the side. This is it here. Obviously the trees have grown quite a bit more than what they had back then, but last people who reported to have needed this depot were the survivors from that Derry Castle shipwreck. When they finally found it, they discovered it to only have salt left in it. Plus, the small boat that was left there was unusable, so they had to salvage materials and build another to reach the castaway depot on the main Auckland island. I mentioned earlier that the New Zealand government would carry out castaway rescue expeditions to the Subantarctic Islands. The survivors of the Derry Castle thought this would be their soon salvation. However, they wrecked just 3 days after New Zealand had done its search and wouldn't be back until the same time next year. So we think that a lot of the times these depots were pilfered by sealers and things like that, so hence why there was only the salt left. Often there are clothing that are left in these depots. They are a particular style of tweed, so that if people pilfer from these depots and then are seen back on the mainland when they didn't need salvation from the depots, they could be spotted quite easily because they were unique to these depots. Here we've got another 6 hoiho on the hill towards the end of our hike. Our 4th and final island of the expedition was visiting the Snares here. When we arrived here, the Snares had appalling weather and only 2 zodiac groups were able to get out on the boat and have a bit closer of a look along the shoreline. We didn't have a permit to go on land here, and looking at where the zodiacs were exploring, I would have deemed it near impossible on a good day anyway. The land rose near vertically out of the water, and we would have slipped straight out and off into the sea again. The weather was also so closed in that we never saw the tops of the island, which were shrouded in cloud. Due to the islands rising steeply out of the ocean, the ship was able to cruise along quite close to the land, so we were able to view the penguin colonies in the bays on the rocks. These here are the Snares crested penguins, just little specks along the rocks, the black and white ones. And just to show you how steep it was in some sections, this is called Penguin Slope. The Snares crested penguins would launch themselves onto the rock face with an incoming wave and hurry to scramble up the slope in an attempt to avoid being dragged out by the receding wave. This particular section had penguins extending way up into the bush above the cloud line. They're quite adventurous. That's just another view of that slope. Yeah, so this is just another overview again of where we went. I feel really fortunate to have been able to go on this trip with Heritage Expeditions. The Subantarctic are wild and remote. They're teeming with wildlife and a windswept vegetation, very alien to ours back home here in New Zealand. More people summit Mount Everest every year than visit these wonderful islands, with permits for only 1,200 people each year. If you can go down there, I truly recommend going. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And that's all.